In today's video, we're going to take our first steps into building our equipment system by creating new armor and weapon item types that the player can pick up and find in the world. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to make this work. So we're going to update our inventory system to support equipable items. So kind of the first thing we'll do is we'll make this new item resource type, the equipable item. We'll use this to be able to create our item drops that are things like weapons or armor. And it will be used for things like a ring or an amulet, which I've got some assets for that. But to begin with, we're going to start with the armor and weapons. And then we're going to need to make some updates to the inventory UI to handle these. And I mean, they'll populate our inventory just fine just by creating these new item resources. But then we also want to make these specific types of items equipable. So we'll make a little equipment section in our UI. And then the next step, once we've got all that in place, we can make those items actually equipable. And not only will they go in the equipment slot, but they'll update the associated stats. So a weapon would update your attack and armor will update the defense. And then lastly, we'll make it so that as we change our equipment, we can update the player sprite. So you can see in these examples, you know, if the player changes sword, he'll get a different sword. And if he changes armor, he'll get a different armor appearance. Because that's a lot of things that we have to get through, right? We're going to break this series of building our equipment system into those at least 4 videos. I'll probably add a 5th or maybe even 6th on top of it. But the core is going to be these 4, all right? And in today's, then, we will focus on the equipable item resources. Now, if you're new to my tutorials and this is kind of all like a shock to you, and you're not sure you want to watch all 60-ish episodes to get to this point, I will link here and in the description. You can find the video where we built our inventory system and the item drop system to begin with. So you can kind of look through the playlist and just watch those videos if you want to, because we are going to be building on top of that. And so, you know, some of the functionality that we need to make this usable already exists in our game. Okay, so look for those if you need them. Let's get started with these equipable items. So I've already brought in some of the resources that are needed. So if you're following along and you want these assets, you can go to the itch.io page, which is linked in the description, and find the player equipment zip file and download that. And to begin with, for just creating these new resources, you're only going to need to bring in one of these assets. So if I look here at my items and I've got a sprite folder, you can see in here I've got this gear.png. You'll find that in that zip file. So go ahead and bring that in for this first step where we're going to be building out the new equipable item resources. All right, so step 1 will be to create the equipable item resource scripts that we need. Let's just review real quickly what we have already for our items. We have this resource called EquipableItemData. And as you can see, this has the name, the description, a texture, which is used to display the item in the inventory or when it drops on the ground. And it's also got this array of effects that you can export, which we've used for like our potions and things like that. And it has a built-in use function, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to extend this resource and create like a new subtype, right, that inherits all this and has some additional things. And, you know, just to review, each of these items that we have is just one of these item resources that we've created. And so really what we want to do is we don't want to replace the item data with our equipment item resource, because that would make our code a little bit more complicated. Instead, it will extend. So it will include this plus some additional functionality and parameters. Okay, so let's go ahead and create in our scripts folder here for the items. I'm going to create a new script that I'm going to call EquipableItemData. So let's go ahead and create that. Create new script. And let's open this up and let's give this a class name, of course. So just EquipableItemData, right? Is that how you spell equipable? Maybe 2 P's? No, that looks wrong. 1 P. Okay. EquipableItemData. And this shouldn't extend node or resource, but instead it should extend item data. So for those of you to whom this concept of inheritance is new, this means that this EquipableItemData will have all of the, you know, functionality and properties that the item data has, plus we're going to add on to it. And the one thing I want to add is an enumerable or an enum that we're going to call type. And what this is going to be used for is to make it easy for us to differentiate what type of item this is. in a way that doesn't require us to type a string, because you could have spelling errors and that might make it hard to track down bugs if if you misspell weapon, So having an enum instead of a string or an integer to determine like what kind of equipable item this is will make that easy. And so we define this enum, and I've given it a capital T for type, and that's to kind of differentiate it. This is not a value that we set. This enum is kind of like a type of variable, if you will. Okay, so let's give these enum some name options. We're going to have weapons, armor. We'll have eventually maybe some amulets. So an amulet or a ring. Okay, 4 simple equipment types, and you could obviously add your own. Just add that type here in the list. And then later on, you could write code to handle them differently based on what type it is, right? But before we can select a type for one of these resources, we also have to provide a variable. So let's make an export variable. And I'll call this one lowercase t type, which is of type. Sorry if using the word type over and over is kind of confusing maybe, right? But I mean, we could rename this, and this could say like weapon type, and then our type would be a weapon type, right? But I'm just using type because it's going to be local to this class, okay? And so we have an export variable, and let's default this to type.weapon, okay? So you can see how these are assigned. So that's kind of how we work with these enums. You say it is a type dot, and then you just pick one of those, okay? Now there is an interesting thing with enums is, by default, when we define an enum this way, weapon is kind of the equivalent to 0 because it's the first item, kind of like an array, right? And then the second key in the enum is this armor, so that would be 1, and then 2 and 3 for amulet and ring. Okay, so we'll work with this a little bit in our code as we work through the equipment. And if you have questions about it, ask it. Maybe we can do a specific tutorial about enums. And in fact, I do want to, because there's some fun things that you can do with it, and it does make code more readable in a lot of cases. But the only other thing that we want in this equipable item data resource type is we want another export variable that's going to help us determine like what benefit or what boosts does this weapon give, or in the case of an armor, does it give, how much defense does it give? And, we could go through and we could just maybe make multiple export variables, so we could have like attack bonus, defense bonus, and go from there. But to make this a little bit easier to extend and a little bit more modular, I'm going to create a new variable that we call modifiers. And this is going to accept an array. So, maybe you could have multiple, like maybe you have a sword that also provides some defense. And so you want to be able to give it attack and defense. But maybe you only have one of those, and maybe you don't know what all those things will be as you move forward. And so what we're going to do is make an array here. We want this array to be of a specific type. And so let's go ahead and create this as well. So I'm going to create in my scripts folder, I'm going to create another new script, and we'll call this EquipableItemModifier. And let's open that up. Now, the equipable item modifier, let's go ahead and give it this class name. Oh my gosh. And the spelling struggles begin. And this can extend a resource. Okay. We're going to give this a type as well. So just like we had a type for our equipable item, is it a weapon, armor, amulet, or ring? These ones, the type is going to refer to like the type of modifier that it is. So maybe we have things like health modifier. The obvious ones that we are going to be using right now are attack and defense. Okay, we'll use those for our weapon and for our armor. And then maybe you want something else like speed. Okay, so I'm not going to cover what we'll do with speed or health right now, but I think these are some obvious types of modifiers that you might want. And we've got a very simple game. If you had more stats in your game, like you had magic or whatever, then it would be pretty easy to just add those on here. So now we need to export that type, right? Just like we did in our equipable item, we'll say export lowercase type. Oops, I missed my var for variable. And we can default this to one of these types. And I usually, if I'm going to default it, I just default it to whatever the first one is. You don't have to do that, but to me, that makes sense, because then it lines up with the drop down. You'll see that in just a minute. And then the only other thing we need on this is a value. And that'll be an integer for this game. It might be a float, but we're using integers and whole values as much as we can here. And we'll just say 1, that's probably the minimum. And there we go. Okay, so we've got this equipable item modifier resource. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and save this file so that when I come back to my equipable item data, I can now change this array and give it a specific type. Okay, so just by putting the little square brackets and putting in the class name that we want this array to contain. So that means every variant of the array will be an equipable item modifier. And by default, that will be an empty array. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So we've built these two classes, and let's actually create a resource with them, a weapon, and see how it works. Now, how I've structured my project is I'm building all of my item resources just in this items folder, and I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. You can see I've got things like my apple, my gem, etc. And so let's go ahead and create a new resource. And instead of doing an item data, you can see underneath item data, there's equipable item data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create one of those. And I'll give it a name. And now I'm going to do something here. I want the naming convention to help me out. And just to make it easy, so I'm not typing too much out, I'm going to put W for weapon. All my weapons will start with W _ and then maybe the weapon name, right? So I think the default weapon is probably like an iron sword. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And when I open this, you can see it opens in the inspector, right? By default, the type was weapon. We could choose armor or amulet or ring. You can see all of the enumerable types we created appear in that dropdown because we exported it. And then we've got modifiers. So we'll do that in just a second, I guess. Let's first do this. The name, I'm going to give it a proper name. And let's give it a description. So like this sword, a standard sword made of iron. Something like that. This is the description that would appear in our inventory when we hover over it or select it. Okay. And then a texture. We do want a texture. So I'm going to go ahead and just look at the sprites and that gear sprite. I'm going to drag that in. And actually, I don't want to just drag that straight to the texture. I take that back. Let's do this because that's an atlas, a texture atlas. I'm going to say new atlas texture, right? An atlas texture, meaning it's like a map and there's multiple textures all packed into one. Now here in the atlas, I will drag in my gear PNG and then edit the region and make sure your pixel snapping is on if you're going to do this. Now I can just kind of drag these edges to find where that is. And you can manually type the numbers in, right? But that's the sprite we want for the sword. I'm going to go ahead and say close. And I do actually probably want the X to be 30, not 3, but 32. Okay. So, and then the width and height of that is 32 pixels. Easy peasy. So there we go. There's our texture now for this item. I'm not going to give it any effects because we're not going to use these items. So you can just ignore the effects for these equipable items. And in fact, if we were to restructure this a little bit, you might not have an effect on any of the item data. Maybe you make it in a specific class that would be called like usable item data. And those are the ones that have effects, but I'm not going to do that right now, but that would be one way to separate those if you wanted to. Okay, so we do need to add some modifiers. So I'm going to say that there's one modifier on this weapon. And in here, we're going to make a new equipable item modifier. And then we got to expand that and then just pick the type. So this one's going to increase the attack by 1. Okay. And there we go. We've got our first item. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go and I'm going to duplicate it maybe first. And I'll just call this one a katana. And open up the katana here. So here we go. I'm going to give the name katana. And then it needs a description. Boom, a blade made from folded steel. Very cutty. Because we're super serious. And then, because I copied it, we've got most of the settings we need up here, except that we would obviously want this attack value to be stronger. So I'm going to just plug in 5 maybe. And last but not least, we do want to update this texture because we already have that katana sprite in this same texture rect. We could come in here, we could edit the region, or what I'm going to do is I know that I've built this so that they're 32 pixels wide. I can just increase this by 32. the X coordinate that is of the start of that region. And there you go. You can see the katana icon right there. So we've got 2 weapons, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's duplicate this one more time, and let's make an armor now. And I think the standard armor, I'll call it a tunic. And I'm just going to use the A underscore for armor. Now this one, obviously, type is armor. We can take this modifier and change that from attack to defense. And I'm going to set this value back to 1. And I've got a description I'm going to just paste in here. The tunic is clean and pressed, and the cape is oh so stylish. And you can see I've got a line return in here, and that'll just tell the description that I want a forced line return right there. Okay, and let's go ahead and update this. Now, because I don't remember the coordinates for this, I'm going to go to edit region. Oh, it is the next one over. Oops. So I'm going to, I wish undo worked in there. Dang it. It's going to be something like this. Okay, close. And then let me just check these. So the X coordinate should be like 32 times 396. That makes sense. That's easy math. And then the width, 32 pixels, and the height, 32 pixels. Okay, there we go. Just clean that up, make sure it looks good. And for some reason, okay, there we go. It wasn't updating, but we've got our little tunic icon. We need to give this a name. We'll call it tunic and cape defense type. We're all good. And just for fun, let's just duplicate this one more time and make the final item that we'll use as we develop out these features. And this one we can call ninja suit, maybe? Ninja suit. Open this up. It is of type armor, like the katana. Oops, I don't want 5 modifiers, but there you go. If we wanted to, in fact, this is kind of fun. You've got this equipment modifier. Let's just make this 2 for fun. And maybe we want, the suit to actually give us, I'm not going to do health or speed right now, but let's do attack so that it can give us defense and attack. It'll give us 5 defense and then maybe 1 additional attack. Okay. Which doesn't make a lot of sense, but maybe you've got a spiked suit and it increases your attack value. I don't know. Okay, so there we go. And let's just update this text here. The ninja suit is totally rad and surprisingly comfy. And then we'll update this Atlas texture. So that's just going to be one more. You could just type, plus 32. Get away. If you do math, simple math equations like plus, minus, or multiplication, it'll do it for you. 128. Okay, I'm liking it. So there we go. We've got these new items, and I'm going to go ahead and just save all this work, and then let's get some of these items in the world and see if we can pick them up. Okay, I need to open a level or something, so I'm going to come down here to my levels. I'm going to go to area 1, and I'll open up level 2. In area 1. That's this area I've got with, what on earth was I doing last time I played around with this? Let me just clean these up real quick. Okay, so within this screen, I think, we could just add some items, I guess, here that we can pick up. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just do Shift Control A. We've got this item pickup scene. Where did it plop it? Right here. Okay. And we just need to assign an item data to this and it'll just work. Alternatively, we could put it in a treasure chest and maybe we'll do one of those as well. But, okay, where did my items folder go? I'm going to drag this ninja suit on there. And let's just test the ninja suit and see if it works. Yoink. Hey, there we go. This ninja suit is totally rad and surprisingly comfy. Okay. So yeah, let's just fill this out with a couple more things, but this is the first step of making this work. We've got a new item type. Obviously, we can't equip it yet or anything, but it looks nice and cool. So let me just add a treasure chest because we've got these handy treasure chest nodes that we've built. And let's see, what does the treasure chest need? Same thing, item data. So like with this one, we could maybe plop in this katana. Boink. And now if I run the scene, got our ninja suit. And there we go. We got a katana right out of that box. A blade made from folded steel. Very cutty. Can't use it yet. So stay tuned for the next video where we're going to update this UI and get it ready for the equipable items. And then, we'll keep building on this over the course of a couple videos until we have a complete working product. So look out for that video. It'll be up here soon as I have it available, right? And as always, thank you everybody for following along, for your comments, and for liking the video. And I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you for all that you do to make it easier and more possible for me to create this content. And don't mind that I don't have a sword right now. It's all part of the plan. And I suppose, as always, we'll see you next time.